All right, folks, let's go over the Canada FRQ. First part says that we want to, let me just get the sharing the screen ready. Just got to get my Notability open. All right, perfect. So we're going to do Canada's economy is currently in a recessionary output gap. Draw a correctly labeled graph of all of this. So let's get the X and Y axis. All right, so we'll draw our X and Y axis and we'll label them. Real GDP on the X. Okay. And then on the Y, we'll call it price level. Then we'll draw an aggregate supply and an aggregate demand curve. So we'll draw the X, right? We'll label that AD. Okay, and then we'll do AS. All right, and then we'll dot from equilibrium, so we'll know what our current output is. Right, we'll go down. So I would label the output as Q for equilibrium, PL for the price level. All right, we should all make sure that's the minimum we draw anytime it asks for a graph. But it did want long run, so we know long run is going to be greater than, so we know full employment's greater than the current. So next to Q, a little bit to the right of Q, I'd write YF. Yep, and go straight up, and I'll draw straight up to a long run aggregate supply curve, and I will label that YF. All right, perfect. Now, let's copy this and make a new, let's just make a duplicate of this. All right, so on this one it said, the next part says B, the central bank and the government do nothing. So because they're doing nothing, workers will eventually accept a lower wage, right? That lower wage will cause the AS curve to shift to the right. So we'll shift the AS curve to the right, and we'll label it AS1 when it's now at full employment. Very good. Okay. So the thing said, explain how the economy will adjust. It'll adjust by an AS. On your graph, show the adjustment brings us there. It's a rightward shift. And again, it's because the cost of producing is falling. So if we do nothing, cost of producing decreases, and we shift the AS curve to the right. All right, then we get to part C, which says, suppose the government is unwilling to wait for the long run adjustment. Marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. The equilibrium output is 500 billion. Full employment should be 540. Calculate the minimum change and indicate the change of government spending. So what we want to do is the formula, 1 over 1 minus MPC. That's going to get us the multiplier. All right, and this is for part C. So we're going to get 1 over 0.2. Right, and 1 over 0.2 is 5. Okay, and then to the side of that, since we need to close a gap of 40, it's 40 over 5. All right, so the gap is 40, the multiplier is 5, which means we get an answer of 8 billion is how much of government spending we need. All right, now it wants to know, but what if we wanted to do tax instead? So underneath that formula, we're going to draw another formula. The tax multiplier is MPC over 1 minus MPC. Okay? Because they're going to save a portion of it. So MPC is 0.8. So that is equal to 0.8 over 0.2, which is equal to 4. And now it's 40 over 4, right, which is 10 billion. And those are your answers to part C. All right, so now we go to part D and we say the central bank takes action to restore to full employment, draw a correctly labeled graph of the money market. So we draw our X and Y axis again. We do quantity of money on the X. Nominal interest on the Y. Okay, then we draw a vertical money supply graph. All right, so the money supply will be vertical. We'll label it MS on top. We'll go with a Q on the bottom. All right, and we'll do a downward sloping money demand curve. All right, so we do the demand curve downward sloping on the graph. All right, we label it MD. We go to where they intersect and we dot across to find the interest rate. I'm going to say 6%. Okay, I'll make it 6. So now the Federal Reserve would buy bonds, which would cause the money supply to shift to the right. They didn't ask you that. They just asked you to show the effect. So we're going to buy bonds. Buying bonds puts more money in the system, and the money supply will shift to the right. So we'll shift MS to the right. All right. MS1 or MS2. Okay, and we dot across from equilibrium now, and we'll go down to 2%. All right, that was part D. Now we go to part E. Mexico and Canada are trading partners, so we got to draw one more graph. So we'll do our X and Y axis again. It's asking, so this is the, it said about Canada, right? So this is the Canadian currency. So the X-axis is quantity of Canadian dollars, which means this is the second part to the Y-axis. So we're going to say pesos slash Canadian dollar. So it's peso slash Canadian dollar, which is just saying how many pesos will it cost us to get a Canadian dollar. All right, and then we're going to draw a regular supply and demand curve, right? And we're just going to label it S and D, like we would do on any curve. Equilibrium. Okay. Going to make up numbers for the, so we'll just make that a Q on the bottom. And I'm going to say it takes 3 pesos to get a Canadian dollar. So I'll make the price. Pesos is 3 there for the price. Right, so it cost them 3 pesos. Now, it says, the question says, based on changing the interest rate in Part D. So we said the nominal interest rate had fallen. Well, how is that going to affect the Canadian market? So what's going to happen is the Mexicans will not want Canadian products. They won't want to buy the bonds or the stocks because interest rates are low. So the demand for the Canadian dollar will go down. We will show it by a leftward shift. Okay. And we get a new price level. So now it's only costing us 2 pesos, or costing the Mexicans 2 pesos to get the currency. All right. Don't forget about the free meals for high school students. And now, some people wanted to say, well, if the interest rate is low, maybe the Canadians want to buy from the Mexicans, get their bonds. Well, they could, and you could have done a supply shift to the right. A supply shift to the right would give you the same lower depreciation of the Canadian dollar. All right, so I would have accepted either one of those answers. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.